All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We have one viewer currently, so hopefully we'll have more people logging in to view this. So just as a note, this is posted to the Health Professions website after the live stream is over. So if you ever want to go back and reference it later on, the slides are on there, and then the PowerPoint and the video is on there too, so you guys can do that. So welcome to the Personal Statement Workshop. We're going to be going over everything that you need to know about developing a personal statement for your various health professions programs. My name is Lauren Keroack. I'm actually one of the psychology academic advisors, but I work with psychology students in general, but also health professions psychology majors. So psych majors who have like med school goals, dental school, PA school, all of that stuff. And I'll let Mary introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Mary. I recognize a couple of you guys out there. And so I'm a biology health professions advisor. So just like she works with psych students, I work with the biology students for those same things. And we're actually going to be co-doing this workshop with you guys so that we get both of us in there for it.
All right, awesome. And as we go through, feel free to ask questions, raise your hand, and we can call on you. You don't need to wait till the very end. I'm fine with you asking questions kind of in the meantime. So as we go through this presentation, I would just say keep this kind of message in mind, what we have on the slide. So what does your DNA say about you? Your personal statement should be just as unique. When we're talking about personal statements, we're going to talk about making it individual to you, reflecting your personality. We don't want generic standard personal statements because that's not going to get you anywhere. So we'll talk about what is a personal statement, what are the different types of personal statements and essays that you're going to be submitting to various health profession schools. We'll go over some fundamentals of writing personal statements, how to conduct a great personal statement, some tips and ideas of how to structure a personal statement, where you can go here on campus and then outside on the internet for help on writing a personal statement, and then there will be a brief activity at the end that'll get your kind of creative brain juices flowing when it comes to thinking about what can go into your personal statement. All right. So when you are applying to medical school, dental school, pharmacy, PA school, PT, all of those various health professions programs, there's going to be two types of essays that you will write. So the first one, and this is what our workshop is focusing on today, is the personal statement. And this is what accompanies the primary application that you submit to these health professions programs. So if you're medical school bound and you're filling out the AMCAS application, you're going to submit a general personal statement that's going to go out to all of the various schools that you're applying to. So these personal statement is not going to be specific to any particular program. So you don't want to name a program or name a school in this personal statement. It's just general. Then, once your primary application has been received by the various programs that you apply to, they will send out secondary applications. And there may be other essays that are included in those secondary applications that you have to respond to. So they could be very specific questions. So there's three general types of admissions essays in the secondary applications. So you might have to kind of go a little bit more in depth about yourself, your interests, your activities, who you are as a person. You might have to compose an essay on why you want to attend that particular school, and that's where you're going to kind of cater it towards that program. Or an essay that might be responding to some sort of statement, a book, contemporary problem or something, and they want to kind of see your thought process and how you think critically about like a social problem, for example. So generally, when you get your secondary application and they say, these are the new essays we want you to respond to, they might be a little bit shorter of essays than your original personal statement, and there's going to be probably a shorter turnaround time. So we're thinking maybe 2 weeks. And so you really have to think quickly and get this essay composed very quickly and then submit it with your secondary application. So some of the questions that might be included on a secondary application admissions essay. So you might have to comment or respond to a prompt regarding current events. So like the state of the medical field, your knowledge about politics that affect the field. So this demonstrates your understanding of the various fields that you're applying to. What about that specific school is appealing to you, and how are you going to be a good fit? So do they have like unique study abroad opportunities or mission trips, or are they a combined MD PhD program? Do they have a research focus? Do they work specifically with rural communities, and how does that fit with your interests? There might be a prompt asking you to respond to a moral dilemma. So for example, here's a potential scenario. You caught another student cheating. How would you respond to that? What steps would you take? In general, there may be an opportunity, even in the primary personal statement, to address bad grades, gaps in your academic history, slip-ups, stuff like that. Or there might be in the secondary application a response to a quote or a statement, something that you're having to reflect upon. So every school has the ability and the authority to choose their own secondary application questions. So you do want to be prepared for all that. And you just kind of have to get the ball rolling very quickly because you have a very short turnaround time. So like I said, this workshop is focusing primarily on the initial personal statement that you submit with your primary application. We're not going to talk that much about the secondary applications. So what is a personal statement? So first and foremost, it's autobiographical. It's about you. So it's going to be an account of your character, your maturity, motivation, and your suitability for a career in medicine. We say medicine, but pharmacy, dental, whatever health profession program you're applying to. So you're talking about yourself, but then also how are you a good fit for this particular profession, and what are you going to bring to the field? So generally, you're going to be answering 2 questions for the selection committee. 1, why should they pick you over somebody else? And why are you a good candidate for this particular field? Like we mentioned before, this is sent to all schools, so it does need to be a general, not specific to any particular program. If you are applying to multiple health professions programs, so say you're applying to medical schools as well as dental schools, your personal statement needs to look different for those 2, because you're going to be talking about your experiences and yourself in a different way for the medical school applications compared to the dental school. The length varies depending on the application system that you're using and what types of programs you're applying to. So you have to be really close, be really careful about what your allotted kind of length is. So for example, AMCAS, which is medical school, MD programs, allows for 5,300 characters. It's really not all that much, and so you really do have to be concise. AA COMOS allows for 4,500 characters, and then other professions like veterinarian school, PharmCast, so pharmacy, allows for 4,500 characters as well. So it's something to do your research ahead of time so that you're getting really close to that character limit. If you're way, way under, say you're allotted 4,500 characters and you only write 2,000 characters, what is that saying to the potential school? Maybe it means that you don't have enough experiences to reflect upon. Maybe it means you're a poor writer, but they don't know. It just doesn't reflect very well. So who will read your personal statement? So basically admissions committees at the various schools that you're applying to. So deans and directors of admissions offices. The admissions committee may be comprised of medical school faculty, community clinicians, medical students who are in the program, but they're kind of in their last couple years, so they have advanced standing. This is important to keep in mind your audience when you are writing your personal statement, because you're not writing for yourself. You're also not writing for your family or your friends who know you well already. You're writing for somebody who's essentially a stranger, somebody who doesn't know anything about you. So you're trying to sell yourself to this program and show them why you're a good fit. So you want to make sure that when these other people, these strangers, are reading your personal statement, 1, that they're going to read the whole statement, that they don't get bored within the first couple sentences, or they're not thrown off by unappealing things like spelling and grammatical errors. You want to make sure that they get through the end You want to make sure that it really conveys who you are as a person, and that it makes you appealing enough for them to want to offer you an interview spot, because this is part of the application. This is what helps the committees determine who they're going to interview. So in your personal statement, what you're aiming to help the reader learn, so there's a lot of things on here. So we talked about a view of your personality. Who are you as a person? How do you work on teams? Just by nature, who are you? And does that fit with the various programs that you're applying to? Want to provide an analysis of your co-curricular experiences. So not just a list. You don't want to rehash what's already in your application. You don't want to say, you know, chronologically, I did this my freshman year, this my second year, this my third year, and just go down. You don't want to do that because they can read that elsewhere in your application. You can touch upon those things, but keep the list part very concise. You're really wanting to reflect and analyze what your experiences have been and what you learned about them. You're going to demonstrate your motivation for a health professions career. How did you develop an interest in this? How did that interest evolve? What experiences led you to become interested in medical school, dental school, pharmacy? Do you have a realistic understanding of what it means to become a doctor, dentist, pharmacist? You know, if you say something in your personal statement, you're applying to medical school and you say, you know, I love to help people, but I really can't, you know, I can't stand the sight of blood. That doesn't really demonstrate a realistic understanding of what it means to be that sort of health professional, because you're going to encounter that stuff on a day-to-day basis. You want to demonstrate your distinctiveness. If you don't want to just say, I'm a great candidate for this program, you want to demonstrate it through specific examples, things that you've done in the past. How do you stand apart from everybody else that's applying? You want to provide some sort of rationale for why they should offer you a seat in their incoming class. And this is also an opportunity if there is some sort of gap in your academic record, or maybe you had a bad semester, but you've come back from that, you do want to provide some sort of explanation for what was going on. It's better to address it up front rather than ignore it, because then the question later is when people are reviewing your application, okay, what are they not saying about that semester? What went on and why did they not address it in their application? So we mentioned that a personal statement should be an autobiography in a very concise form. So it goes into an autobiography. Again, it reveals your personality traits. You're going to want to focus on a few key events or people that have influenced your decision to pursue this career. You can't, like I said, make a whole list of everything that's ever happened to you and everything you've ever done. There's just not room for that, and that becomes really boring. So if you can focus on 2 or 3 key things that are most impactful, that's what you want to include in your personal statement. Explain how those affected you. Not to say, you know, I had this experience on a medical mission trip, and that's what led to my interest in medicine. Well, you need to go beyond that. Like, how did it impact you? What about that experience led you to be interested in medicine? And of course, you need to maintain interest. So when we talk about distinguishing yourself from all the other applicants that these schools are receiving, so in general, everybody is a hard worker. Can't say everybody, but most of the people that are applying are hard workers. They want to help people. They've been impacted by their own personal illness or injury, or the personal illness and injury of somebody else in their family or close friend. They want to form trusting and long-term relationships with patients. So these are pretty standard. And yes, that may inform why you want to go into this particular profession, but that's not going to set you apart from everybody else who's applying and also wants to help people and also is a caring and passionate person. Those are kind of like given. Like, we don't want you to be a medical provider if you can't, you know, demonstrate those things. So you have to figure out what is going to set you apart from everyone else that is in addition to all of these things. So you have to figure out what that means for you. I can't stand up here and say, you know, you should include this, this, and this in your personal statement to help set yourself apart, because I don't know you individually. You really have to do some self-reflection and figure that out for yourself. So once the person who's ever reading it has read your personal statement, they should have no doubt in their mind that you have sufficiently self-reflected, examined yourself, your experiences, your worldview, your values, all of that stuff. And they should have no doubt that you've already immersed yourself in healthcare and medicine, that you've had sufficient experiences to know what the field is about, that you've observed practitioners out in the field, that you've been reading about current events in medicine or dental or pharmacy, that you've thought about it, that you know what you're getting yourself into, and you know how you can contribute to the field in a positive way. So this is an important piece. Sell yourself without being arrogant. Be confident and share who you are, but don't do it in a very arrogant way, because that can be a kiss of death, honestly, when it comes to not only personal statements, but also interviews. You know, you could be a well-rounded, applicant and be really stellar, but if the admissions committee is reading your personal statement and they get that flavor of arrogance, they're going to say, I don't know if we want this person in our school. Should we really give them a seat? So we've talked a lot about like what the personal statement should have in it, but we should also talk about what it should not have in it. So what are some of the things to avoid? So you want to be really careful. Don't be critical of the admissions process or the people participating in the admissions process. You may not agree with how people are selected for health profession schools, but keep that to yourself. Don't let that out in your essay. Be careful, like you may have heard things from, brother and sister, mom and dad, whoever may have gone through medical school, dental school. You may have friends who have been there, done that, and they have their own stories to share. That's totally fine. Just keep that to yourself. Don't let it come out in your essay. Don't be too abstract in your writing. You do want to have specific examples that you can provide that demonstrate to the admissions committee who you are, what you've done. So if you speak in abstract terms and you don't ever refer to yourself, how do they know that you're actually writing about you? Be really careful about engaging in controversial topics or subjects in your personal statement. Now this might be appropriate in the secondary admissions essays that come along with the secondary application. If they give you a prompt that says, respond to this controversial topic, then of course that's appropriate. But in your first personal statement, you don't want a controversial topic to be the first impression that somebody gets of you. So you may feel really, really strongly about being pro-choice or abortion rights, but that's probably not a good idea to put that in your personal statement because you don't know who's going to be sitting on the committee. And they may read that and be immediately put off by your application. So you just want to be really, really careful about sensitive subjects like that. So assume that the readers are in your head. They only know what you've written. So I guess that's assume that the readers are not in your head. So they don't know what you're thinking. They only know what's on paper. So something may be very clear to you, a logical progression that you outline in your personal statement, but it may not be clear to somebody who's never met you. So this is where getting feedback from other people is really important. Going to the writing center on campus, having a faculty member or a trusted peer read your essay so that they maybe don't know you as well as you do. They can read it and say, okay, this doesn't really make sense. What connection are you trying to make here? You do not want to rehash the content of your volunteer experiences. And so, like I said, it does not want to be a list, just a basic recap of everything you've done, because they can read that elsewhere in your application. Don't plagiarize, which is kind of self-explanatory, and we should know this, but it does happen. Don't write a very short essay. So you want to be brief, you want to have brevity, you want to be concise, but that's to stay within the allotted characters. If you're writing something that's half of what they expect you to write, what does that show about you? And also, you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to talk about everything that's influenced you. And so if you're pushing the character limit, that's fine, but don't go over the character limit. And don't ever underestimate the importance of your personal statement, because it really does say a lot about you. It's a little bit more of a subjective criteria that people can evaluate you on. It's a little bit different than GPA, a little bit different than test scores. Professional schools do know when a personal statement does not represent you, so if you use some sort of professional editing service or something to kind of write it for you, one, you got to question the ethics of that. But two, you probably can tell when it's not been written by the person, because they're going to be looking for consistency within your application. So if you build out this portion of your application in one way, and then your personal statement looks like it's written by an entirely different person, they're going to know, or they're going to be able to sense that it's written by somebody else. So it can be the kiss of death in your application, and you just don't want to do that. Some more don'ts. So some of these things can kind of help, well, not help, they can hurt your personal statement. So careless spelling and grammar, of course, you want to have it proofread, make sure that your spelling and grammar is accurate. Don't go for shock value. Don't try and create a sense of drama in your personal statement, because that doesn't have a sense of realism. And it's really just for shock value. It doesn't have kind of any value to it. Lack of humility, this goes back to not being arrogant. Avoid the use of generalities and cliches, common statements. Try to avoid too many, don't use quotes, because that doesn't really reflect necessarily your own words, it reflects somebody else's words. Bad analogies. And another thing is a big don't is don't start too late on writing your personal statement. You need to give yourself plenty of time to do draft after draft and edits. So if you're starting to write your personal statement a month before your application is due, that's just not enough time. You need to give yourself several months at least. So putting your thoughts into writing, we talked about this a little bit, but always provide an example to demonstrate. So you want to show rather than tell. So don't say, I'm a good team player. What does that mean? How do we know that you're a good team player? You may know it personally, but a stranger who's reading your application won't necessarily know it. So if you can provide some sort of specific example to reflect that, it's always going to help. Try to limit the description of each event to a minimum, because you don't want to take up unnecessary space with that. Spend more of your time reflecting and analyzing on the experience. So little time summarizing and explaining what happened, and then the bulk of it should be talking about, what does this mean? How does this make me a good potential healthcare provider? This is how it helped me grow, stuff like that. So you want to, when you're thinking about reflection, some of the questions you can ask yourself. So how did this specific experience shape me as a person? How did it give me insight? What kind of insight did it give me? How does it prepare me to be a good healthcare provider? And then how can I share this or show this in some sort of specific story or example? Alrighty, so I'm going to turn it over to Mary. But up to this point, does anyone have any questions? Talked a lot about the fundamentals of writing a good personal statement, so she's going to go into a little bit more detail of how to go about constructing one.
Yes, we're going to go way back to the time in which you were in first grade or even kindergarten, you were learning how to write an essay. Because it's really what the fundamentals of writing a personal statement come back to, right? So first thing, brainstorming. We all did this, right? The little clouds, put in your ideas, what you want to do, you attach them to other ideas and how that works. It's really important. In fact, it's important no matter where you're writing, but it's really important to start brainstorming, thinking about what you want that personal statement to talk about. So of course, why did you develop an interest, right? All the things we've just, that Lauren's just gone over. Why is my personality suited for this profession? How have I demonstrated that? How can I display my knowledge in the profession? Start answering these questions. Start creating ideas for yourselves. When you start to latch on to certain ideas, it starts to grow. And then your brainstorm is nice and big and you can kind of work with it, right? So definitely make sure that we're brainstorming. It's the first step in any kind of writing. And of course, one of the big things is always explain and not excuse. So if you are talking about bad grades or a semester that you did poorly, instead of my teacher was terrible and that's why I received a D, or I couldn't understand my teacher and that's why I received a B, right? Instead, take onus for your bad grade or your bad semester or whatever that you're explaining, right? And explain it rather than excuse it. Right? So it happened, so now we have to just figure out why it happened, but not because other people did it, right? So make sure we're explaining instead of excusing. So then we want to explore those possible answers. Now we've looked over the questions we want to think about. We've answered those questions. We're starting to explore what that means for us and what we want our personal statement to talk about. Now we're going to select an essay structure. how do we want to take those ideas that we've collected from our brainstorming and put that into a structure for an essay? So there's a couple different ways, and there's lots of more ways than this. These are just tend to be the top three. The first is chronological, right? So you present your information in a chronological order to the point you're at now. And there's lots of ways of doing that beyond just telling a story, right? So it doesn't need to be a, when I was 6 years old, I did this, right? It can definitely start with maybe your first experience, then your second experience, your third, that have led overall collectively to your choice to go into a healthcare profession. The second is cause and effect. So something occurring and how that's affected you. Doesn't have to be chronological, but it can be, depends. So you can mix and match all of these together too. There's lots of ways to do that. And then a theme. So a theme would be something like focusing on your specific skill sets and showing those, or focusing on what you enjoy most about medicine and focusing on that. So themes can be a lot of different things. Tends to be the most common. That doesn't mean that because it's the most common structure that they all look the same. So keep that in mind. If it's something you want to do, there's lots of ways to make it stand out from other people's, even if they're using the same kind of structure of their essay. All right. Oh, the fourth part is to create an outline. How many people create outlines in their normal writing for English classes and all that before you start writing a paragraph? Maybe a little bit, okay. You need to do it for your personal statement. Create an outline. This is how, so now you've got those random bubbles of ideas from your brainstorm. This is how you start to structure it into that structure you want. So you start to say, okay, well, my intro paragraph is going to touch on these things. My second paragraph is going to touch on this. My third is going to touch on this. And you can break that down even more, right? And that will help you write a more, I would say, concise and accurate essay about you, right? And it allows you to be vivid in your description, in your explanation, right? It allows you to be a little bit more exciting because you've got all the basics written down already. Now you're just fleshing it out and making it look pretty. So outlines are super important. I'm trying to make sure my numbers are off right on this. But yeah, so then you want to start writing. So after you've created that outline, that's when you start writing your first draft. Okay? So I normally tell my students to start with an introduction and a conclusion. It's really good when you can tie an essay back together. The hardest part for most students is a conclusion for their personal statement. Because it's hard to say, okay, told you all this cool stuff, now I'm wrapping it up. It is actually really hard for most people to write conclusions. So if you write your intro and your conclusion next, you can fill in all the other stuff, right? Because you've already written an outline of what it's going to look like. But then you can make sure that those two things tie together. Right? A lot of times if we just write in a straight line or without an outline or any of those things, it tends to create an essay that sounds either very drab or disconnected in some way. And we don't want that to be. We want it to flow really nicely. Flow is the main word. Flow is what it's all about when it comes to essay writing. And you should have 7 to 10 drafts, 8 to 9, whatever. As many drafts as possible. Have more and more people read it. Throw things out. Come back to it a month later. If you give yourself enough time, as Lauren said, and you take 3-4 months to write your personal statement, you can say, okay, I think it looks good. I'll come back in 2 weeks and look at it. So it's much easier for your brain to notice mistakes, to notice inconsistencies when you've given yourself a break from it. If you only give yourself a month to write your personal statement, you're going to be looking at it every day. And those things are going to be missed. So we really want to make sure you take some time to write it. That's weird. So you did like opposite. I was like, wait a second. I feel like it's wrong. But yeah, so there is opposite. That's fine. All right. So then we want to proofread. So now you've created multiple drafts. You think it looks great. We want to definitely proofread. And this is part of that drafting process, right? You don't have to just proofread at the end. You can always check through grammar and syntax and make sure all of those things are proper. One of the big things I have noticed is, trying to think, tense. A lot of students I've noticed when I look at personal statements, the tense in a sentence is wrong, right? Past tense here and future tense here just doesn't sound right. So make sure we're also looking at tense. It's not on the board, but so grammar and punctuation mechanics, right? You want to make sure that your verbs and adjectives are in the right order and don't sound strange when people are reading it. Word choice, have a thesaurus. There are thesauruses online now. You don't have to have a paper one like when I was in school, right? So you can definitely make sure that you have one alongside you when you're writing. So that when you start to notice, oh, wow, I've said requirement like 20 times in my essay, you can go back and try to find alternatives for that word, and maybe alternatives for those sentences or that idea that you're trying to come up with, right? And well, it says vocabulary thesaurus at the bottom too. All right. So the basic structure is really tiny. The basic structure of an essay, right? We all know this. Again, going back to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, an intro paragraph, 3 paragraphs in the middle, and a conclusion. Again, we don't need to be abstract or funky in the way we write our personal statements. We want it to be gripping and something that they read all the way through, but it doesn't need to be cool and like new age, right? You can definitely use the old school 5-paragraph format. And we encourage that. It's easier to read for most people, easier to understand what you're doing. And if you're tying in everything together and making it look good, that's all they're going to need, okay? Transitions, big one, right? Stopping one idea and just starting the next idea tends to seem really jumpy. It breaks up that flow of an essay. So make sure that we're brushing up on transitionary words, transitionary sentences, things that can bring from one idea to another. Your outline will help with this, because if you have an outline and you know where your whole essay is going to go, then you can work to figure out how to make those connections between the ideas that you have in your outline. Right? And then we talk about being within our word count, right? So I usually tell my students to write first. Don't worry about the word count in your first or second draft, because you want to make sure that what you're putting on paper sounds good and that it makes sense. You're getting your idea across. When you go back to your 3rd, 4th, 5th draft, that's when we want to start cutting back on things if we're above the word count, or adding things if we're below the word count. So there's lots of ways to do that. A lot of times people come out above the word count. Rarely are people below it, but I mean, it happens, but for the most part, people have to cut back. So where can we cut back? A lot of times it's in different things. So at this point in time, instead of just now, right? 3 characters instead of a bunch, right? Things like that. Using shorter words. This would be our secondary option, right? Utilize is a much better word than use. But if you're finding that, oh, here's where I can save some space so that my essay still makes sense, you can always use shorter words that mean the same thing. Utilizing that thesaurus, right? We'll get back to medical terms. Also, hyphenated words, right? So instead of cannot, can't. I know for the most part we talk about not using that in essays, but in terms of trying to keep within word count, it's totally okay. If as a 3rd option we're still above, we want to just cut out maybe 10 or 12 characters, going through and using some hyphenated words, okay? Now, it is important to use your medical terminology. You guys have had experiences before you're writing your personal statement, right? You've been in the medical field in some capacity, whether it's been shadowing or volunteering. And so you want to make sure that if you're going to talk about things, that you're utilizing the correct terminology, right? It sounds really cool to say cardiothoracic surgery, but if you describe that incorrectly in your personal statement, or you say that but aren't really meaning that, they're going to know. I mean, the people reading these essays are medical professionals. They are doctors, sometimes nurses, that are sitting on your committees. So if you are going to use medical terminology, which I would encourage you to do, use your knowledge that you've learned. Just make sure that you're using it correctly. So that might mean having the doctor you've shadowed or worked with closely to read it over. Make sure that it's using those words correctly. So finding help. There's lots of places to get help for your personal statement. The first is the Writing Center. So the Writing Center here in the library, actually, they've been trained by the Health Professions Office. So they are familiar with personal statements. They know what to look for and what to help you guys with. And they can do multiple appointments. Additionally, there are multiple people there. So if you aren't particularly fond of someone you've worked with, you have other options, right? And so make sure that you're utilizing that Writing Center service. I normally suggest that you've had at least a couple drafts done yourself before you go there. So you really want to make sure that your ideas are already on the paper. You're wanting to make sure that everything else is sounding good. The flow, the syntax, all of that. Reach out to professionals that you've worked with personally. Right? Reach out to them and ask them, does this sound good? Are there things that I can work on? Work with the people that you know. You can also utilize friends and family members. You can utilize people that you work with at work, people you are in class with, anybody that you think could be beneficial in helping review your personal statement. Usually most advisors, if you've worked with them closely, will read your personal statement and let you know what they think. So there's lots of other ways to get that, make sure that you're getting a bunch of drafts in. And then the University of Minnesota, and we have this link on here, it'll be on the website as well, has a really great free personal statement workshop that's all online. So it's an actual click-through workshop. It's really, really cool. So it's a secondary resource to kind of get more of that information, kind of get your thoughts pulled into one spot. So it's really, really good. It's all online. All right, so we're going to do our activity. So for those who are watching online, you can follow along. We're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes for this. If you haven't grabbed a paper from the back, make sure that you do. And so what we're going to do is on that paper that you got, there's two question spots, right? I'm going to put a bunch of the questions on the board. These are going to help you sort of think about what you want to write your personal statement about. It's a little writing activity, right? It doesn't have to sound really crazy or awesome, but try to answer at least two of these questions, right? And on the back of the sheet are some of the competencies that most medical professions are looking for. So you can always use that to help you answer some of the questions. I know they're really, really tiny. I'm sorry. There's a lot of questions. But there's things like, how or why did you develop an interest in medicine? Excuse me. Have you fully researched your intended health profession? If not, what else do you need to know? If so, how holistically competitive are you? Right? More than just GPA and test score, what else have you been doing? What is your motivation for pursuing medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, etc.? Are they mature rather than pediatric? Right? So I like to help people versus working in the field for years and really seeing that children with cancer is something you want to work with because you've worked with those people before, right? So making sure that your reasonings are mature as well. What experiences have helped you grow in your understanding of the field? How can you display your knowledge of the profession? What examples can you provide about your humanistic capacity? What is it specifically about medicine that will allow you to serve others? What skills or characteristics do you embody that make you a good fit? And do they align with those competencies which are on the back of your paper? What goals and values are important to you in the successful practice of your profession? How is your personality suited for this profession? What sets you apart from other applicants? Does your GPA test score reflect your academic potential? Why or why not? And if you needed to explain incompletes, withdrawals, repeated courses, etc., how do you do that? Oh, and what is your vision for the future? So go ahead and answer two of them. They'll stay up here, right? Take your time to answer some of them. If you feel comfortable at the end to share with everybody, you can. It's okay if you don't. But definitely start using your brain, working on getting those creative juices flowing, okay? All right, I'll give you about 10 minutes. Great. How have you guys been doing? Good. You're getting your creative juices flowing, right? Does anybody want to share what they wrote or what question they answered and what they wrote? It's okay. It's all right if you don't. Well, keep doing that, right? And you'll have all of these questions. They're on our website and on the live stream on YouTube, so you can go through the slides and you can get all these questions. So you can start doing more of these types of things at home. Get your creative juices flowing so you know what you want to focus on. Now, are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions about personal statements before we close for the day? Yeah.
Is religion okay to talk about in personal statements?
It depends how you're talking about religion. So if you're expressing that you have a religious belief and that it's important to you and for various reasons and it's shaped who you want to be in the future, then yes, of course. But if it's talking in a political spectrum, probably not. So it's how you word things, right? So definitely once you've written that type of area of your personal statement, to run it by a couple people and see what they think.
I would say too, it's also important if you are, because there are religiously affiliated health professions programs out there, medical school, stuff like that. And so if the programs you're applying to are religiously affiliated, you want to make sure that you understand what their philosophy is and how you can articulate how you fit with that philosophy in your personal statement. So that would be another appropriate way to incorporate it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a question?
It was just on the characters. It's not like words. It's actually like every letter counts as a character. Right?
Yes, it is on characters. So the character count includes spaces, it includes indentation, it includes new paragraph movement, all of that stuff. So yeah, it's really important to keep them in characters. There's actually a really great website called charactercount.com. At least I think it's .com. If you Google character count, it's the first website, and you can copy and paste your stuff in there, and it'll count all your characters for you, which I know is sometimes hard to do on like Word and stuff.
In terms of explaining academic gaps, as you guys worded it, what is the best way to do that without coming across as negative or focusing on the negative aspect of academic gap?
I always suggest that students focus on what they've learned from that experience, because even when you've had negative experiences in college, you are learning something, right? So whether it's realizing that you maybe particularly weren't ready for that course load and had learned how to balance your schedule better, if it led to you learning better study habits and led to you reaching out to a studying counselor that helps with study habits, these are things that really show the positive aspects of having a negative experience in the past. So usually that's what I suggest for students to focus on when it comes to that. Each person's going to have a different positive outcome from those types of bad grades or bad semesters. Usually that what did I learn from this experience goes across the board, but definitely for that, it keeps it from seeming like I had this terrible experience, my life is so terrible because of it. It's really looking forward to the future and saying, this is what I've learned, here's maybe how I've shown that I've grown from that experience. Anybody else? Well, you can also contact us by email. You can usually by email is the best way. You can also look on our website with a lot of information on there as well. So if you have any other questions, you can always, we'll also be here as well after we close off the live stream. So if you have additional ones that you don't want to ask on the camera, we're here. All right, awesome.